What first stunned Hollywood is now turning into something far more disturbing as a preliminary forensic report has helped investigators narrow a critical window of time, and what it suggests has shaken even seasoned experts. Authorities say the situation escalated rapidly, and what unfolded inside the home nor was it sudden. Instead, investigators believe it was the result of that had been building quietly beneath the surface. Sources familiar with the case believe the night may have begun earlier at Conan O'Brien's Christmas party, where several guests reportedly noticed Nick acting tense and unpredictable. What started as an argument, according to those accounts, may have followed him long after the party ended, setting the stage for everything that came next. After leaving the event, Nick allegedly returned to the Brentwood area. Investigators describe his behavior as calm on the outside, controlled in his movements, and deliberate in every step. Surveillance and witness accounts suggest nothing erratic at first glance. That's part of what has unsettled authorities the most. Records indicate that he later checked into a nearby hotel, acting composed and quiet, drawing no attention as he paid and went to his room. What raised eyebrows came shortly afterward. Investigators confirmed that Nick secured the services of Alan Jackson, one of the most high-profile defense attorneys in the country, remarkably quickly. According to sources, this was allegedly done using family inheritance funds, a move that immediately sparked difficult questions. The speed and confidence of that decision stood out. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office states that the incident inside the home occurred sometime between midnight and the early morning hours. There were no signs of forced entry because none were needed. Investigators say the individual had access, familiarity, and full knowledge of the residence. Security records later placed Nick at a Santa Monica hotel around 4 a.m., roughly 20 minutes from Brentwood. Hotel staff reported nothing unusual, no visible distress, no phone calls, just a man sitting quietly, seemingly detached from everything happening elsewhere. Hours later, concern turned into alarm when a scheduled visitor arrived at the home and received no response. Calls went unanswered, doors were opened. In that moment, everything changed. Authorities rushed in, secured the scene, and quickly realized this was not a sudden, isolated act, but the end point of a night that had unraveled in silence. Earlier that evening, around 9 p.m., surveillance footage from an Arco gas station near Exposition Park captured Nick purchasing a sports drink. He appeared restless, pacing slightly, scanning the area, yet still composed enough to complete the transaction. At approximately 9:15 p.m., LAPD officers working with U.S. Marshals detained him nearby. There was no resistance, no explanation. He remained silent as officers took him into custody. Footage from that moment shows a young man who appears emotionally drained rather than panicked. Later, forensic estimates suggested the couple had likely passed several hours before they were discovered. That timeline deepened the mystery and forced investigators to confront a difficult question: what truly led to that breaking point? Authorities believe Nick may have attempted to clean himself before leaving the home or later at the hotel. Despite that, traces of evidence may still remain. Surveillance cameras tracked his movements throughout Santa Monica that same morning. Experts believe the object involved was likely taken from inside the home, something ordinary and easily accessible. That detail added a chilling layer. Familiarity mattered. Forensic analysis later corrected early assumptions. Initial reports suggesting a single act were revised after evidence revealed multiple serious injuries. Professor Joseph Scott Morgan, a respected forensic expert, explained that repeated injuries often suggest deliberate action rather than a sudden emotional outburst. These situations involve proximity, control, and sustained effort. This was not something that happened in seconds. Another troubling detail emerged from reports suggesting the couple may have been resting when the incident began. If accurate, it would indicate intimate knowledge of routines and vulnerabilities. Investigators emphasize that actions taken at such close range reflect personal, controlled behavior rather than detachment. Attention soon turned to what followed. Reports revealed that Nick allegedly used family inheritance funds to secure legal representation. Public reaction was immediate. His attorney, Alan Jackson, is known for handling only the most complex cases, often at extraordinary cost. When questioned, Jackson declined to discuss who was paying his fees. Then came a major update. On December 18, 2025, multiple sources close to the family reported that the legal fees were allegedly being covered by the Reiner estate, valued at approximately $200 million. According to insiders, surviving relatives believed pursuing a mental health-based defense was the most humane path forward. As the investigation continues, each new detail adds weight. What remains unanswered is not just how this happened, but why. They reportedly believed this course of action aligned with what Rob and Michelle might have wanted for their son under California law. Legally, anyone convicted in a case like this cannot benefit from the victim's estate, a reality that now hangs over every decision connected to the case. As the investigation moves forward, each new detail seems to raise more questions instead of bringing clarity. The law itself adds another layer of complexity. While a defendant cannot inherit from victims, it does not automatically prevent other relatives or estate executors from using estate funds to cover legal defense costs. Legal analyst Sean Wessner explained that although this is technically allowed during active proceedings, it remains controversial and legally risky. Some experts argue an executor could refuse to authorize such payments to avoid backlash or future legal disputes. As of now, neither the family nor the court has officially confirmed where the legal funding is coming from. That silence has only intensified public speculation. Loyalty, justice, and morality are colliding in real time, and no one involved appears ready to draw a clear line just yet. Then came the next major development. Nick Reiner appeared in court for the first time, facing 2 counts of first-degree charges with aggravating circumstances involving multiple victims. The gravity of the moment was impossible to ignore. He entered the courtroom wearing a standard blue inmate uniform, a stark contrast to the life of privilege once associated with his last name. Standing beside him was Alan Jackson, calm, controlled, and clearly prepared. The hearing was tightly restricted, with no live cameras permitted, which only fueled public curiosity further. Jackson immediately requested a delay of the formal arraignment to give his client more time to determine how to proceed. The judge agreed, setting the next hearing for January 7th. Until then, Nick remains in custody at the Los Angeles County Jail. During the hearing, the only time the public heard Nick speak came in response to a single question. Asked whether he would waive his right to a speedy trial, he answered quietly, "Yes, Your Honor, I do." No explanation followed. The hearing ended quickly, leaving a heavy silence behind. As attention turns toward January 7th, investigators have revisited a deeply troubling aspect of the story. Behind the famous name and public visibility was a long history of personal struggle that followed Nick for years. Born in 1993, he reportedly began experimenting with substances around the age of 15, and what followed became a cycle that proved incredibly difficult to break. Growing up surrounded by expectation, pressure, and visibility, Nick's world often felt overwhelming. His family reportedly recognized the warning signs early and sought help. Rob and Michelle sent him to rehabilitation while he was still a teenager, beginning a long pattern of treatment and relapse. Despite setbacks, they never cut ties. They continued offering structure and support, even allowing him to return to their Brentwood home in hopes of providing stability. That history now sits at the center of the case, raising painful questions about responsibility, boundaries, and how far parental devotion can stretch. Rob reportedly spent years trying to guide Nick through creative projects, believing purpose could offer stability. Addiction, however, remained relentless. Recovery was fragile, and progress often temporary. The home meant to provide safety slowly became a place of constant concern and emotional strain. Friends say Rob lived by one belief: a parent never gives up on their child. That devotion defined his approach, even as the situation grew more volatile. Eventually, What friends described as tough love led Nick to leave and live independently. He moved between states, Maine, New Jersey, Texas, searching for freedom but finding instability instead. There was a brief moment of hope in 2015 when Nick stayed sober long enough to work with his father on the film Being Charlie. The project mirrored his own struggles and brought father and son together. For a time, trust returned, but by 2018, he relapsed again, reportedly causing significant property damage during a volatile episode. By 2020, Rob and Michelle allowed him to return home once more, hoping supervision might help. Friends say their optimism was fading. Nick's behavior reportedly became more unpredictable in the months leading up to the incident. That long history now looms over the courtroom. Many believe addiction and mental health may play a role in the defense strategy. Alan Jackson is known for cases that focus heavily on mental condition and intent. Some insiders suggest the defense may argue that years of substance use impaired Nick's ability to regulate his actions that night. Witnesses at the Santa Monica Hotel reportedly described him as heavily impaired. As the case continues, the past and present remain tightly intertwined, leaving the public watching closely for what comes next. Investigators have made one thing clear: substance use alone does not remove legal responsibility. Under California law, voluntary intoxication rarely excuses actions. At most, it may affect how intent is interpreted, and intent is the central battle in this case. Prosecutors are already signaling that earlier conflicts and deliberate behavior point to awareness and control, not confusion. If the evidence shows preparation instead of panic, the defense faces a steep uphill climb. With special circumstances attached, Nick could face life without the possibility of release. Even without those enhancements, sentencing could still fall between 25 years to life. Authorities have stated there is no indication of self-defense or accidental harm. Experts describe the incident as driven by intense emotion or loss of control, rather than mistake. What raises the stakes further is the public profile of the victims, decades-long Hollywood figures with deep industry ties. Potential witnesses reportedly include names like Conan O'Brien, Larry David, and Billy Crystal, turning the case into a possible national spectacle. Analysts believe the trial may not begin until late 2026 or early 2027, with a plea deal considered unlikely. Forensic findings reportedly place Nick directly at the scene, supported by biological evidence and surveillance footage. Age also matters. Rob and Michelle were elderly, while Nick was 32. Prosecutors are expected to highlight that imbalance, along with the sustained nature of the incident, as signs of intent. Then the focus returns to the night many believe set everything in motion: Conan O'Brien's Christmas party. Rob and Michelle brought Nick along because they were worried about him. Friends say his behavior had grown increasingly unpredictable, and leaving him alone felt risky. At the party, Nick didn't blend in. While others laughed and mingled, he stayed on the edges, hoodie pulled tight, scanning the room. Guests noticed his energy felt off. He approached people abruptly, asking flat, uncomfortable questions. The tension peaked after an awkward interaction with Bill Hader, after which Nick walked away suddenly. The mood shifted, laughter faded. Michelle tried to smooth things over, while Rob quietly kept watch. By around 10 p.m., the couple was ready to leave, whispering to each other as guests looked on, sensing something wasn't right. Then things escalated, not loud enough to stop the music, but sharp enough to turn heads. One insider later claimed Nick accused his parents of talking about him behind his back, his voice tight with anger. Rob tried to calm him, keeping his tone low. "Let's just go home," he said quietly. But Nick pushed past him, knocking over a small table of drinks. That moment drew attention. Security stepped in, and Conan O'Brien moved quickly to help de-escalate the situation. "It's okay, let's get some air," he reportedly said. The group shifted toward the exit. Michelle clutched Rob's arm, her face pale with worry. Outside, the cold December air hit hard. Rob guided Nick toward the car, speaking calmly, trying to reason with him. Michelle stayed a few steps back, visibly shaken. Witnesses said Nick paced near the driveway, hands trembling, arguing in short bursts. He shouted something incoherent before finally getting into the car and slamming the door. The Reiners left quietly. To most guests, it was an awkward moment people assumed would pass. For Rob and Michelle, that drive home marked the beginning of their final hours. Neighbors in Brentwood later reported hearing muffled voices and faint arguing around midnight. Nothing that sounded alarming at the time. Just a family disagreement. By morning, that same house would become the center of an investigation that stunned Hollywood. Investigators believed the drive home was tense. Nick reportedly accused his parents of embarrassing him. Rob tried to de-escalate, urging him to calm down and rest. But once inside the house, the confrontation didn't fade, it intensified. Forensic specialists believe that sometime between midnight and the early morning hours, Nick entered the master bedroom where his parents were resting. What drove him in that moment remains unclear. Anger, emotional collapse, or something deeper. Investigators describe what followed as extreme and deeply disturbing. What makes the case even harder to process is how ordinary the night had begun. Friends say Rob and Michelle were cautiously hopeful about Nick's progress. They believed recent therapy and medication were helping. Rob had even talked about a new creative project they could work on together. No one imagined how fast everything would unravel. The discovery sent shockwaves through Hollywood. News spread first as whispers, then as confirmation. Tributes flooded social media as colleagues and fans struggled to understand how a family so deeply loved could be torn apart in a single night. Attention quickly shifted to Nick, his mental state, and the warning signs people now wondered if they had missed. Old interviews resurfaced, including one where Nick once said, "I feel like I was born into a spotlight. I never asked for that." The quote echoed with painful weight. As investigators pieced the case together, surveillance footage, forensic material, and witness statements from the party sharpened the timeline. Nick's erratic behavior, the argument, the abrupt departure. Everything began to align. Yet deeper questions lingered, about responsibility, about limits, about how far love can stretch before it breaks. Psychologists consulted by multiple outlets described the situation as a perfect storm. Long-term instability, emotional volatility, and unresolved trauma colliding at once. Even Conan O'Brien, who rarely comments on private matters, released a brief statement expressing sorrow and disbelief. Nearly a year later, the case still dominates headlines. What was meant to be a joyful December celebration became the beginning of one of Hollywood's most haunting chapters. A reminder that success and fame offer no protection from inner chaos, and that some families fight with everything they have and still lose.